Have you ever felt trapped in a relationship that drains your soul, leaving you questioning your own sanity? Welcome to Narcissistic Abuse with Vanessa Reiser, the podcast that shines a light on the dark tactics of abusers and empowers survivors to reclaim their lives. I'm Vanessa Reiser, licensed therapist, author, advocate, and fellow warrior on the path to healing from narcissistic and cult abuse. Joining me for many upcoming episodes is my co-host Dave. We'll unpack each conversation together, diving deeper into narcissistic abuse, cult dynamics, politics, pop culture, and what it all means for real life healing. Today, we'll hear harrowing stories from survivors, explore the psychology behind these toxic relationships, and share insights and tools to spot red flags, break free, and begin profound healing. This show is for mature audiences and may include upsetting topics like violence. For full content warnings, sources, and resources, check the episode notes. Guest opinions are their own and don't necessarily reflect mine or any affiliated platforms. This podcast is not a substitute for therapy, legal, or medical advice. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. It's your host, Vanessa, coming to you from right here in Red Bank, New Jersey. And I am so thrilled you're joining me today. Today we have the best co-host ever, Dave, joining us. We are jumping straight back into an incredible show. Last episode, I sat down with the incredible Tonia Bales. You know her from Dirty John, where she bravely shared her story of survival, manipulation, and ultimately taking back her power. If you haven't listened yet, pause this right now. Go catch that full interview because, wow, it's powerful. It's raw, and it's one you won't forget. Today, Dave and I are doing the deep dive, and we will be doing this every week after every episode. So send us all of your questions after every show so we can answer everything. We're unpacking the biggest moments from that conversation, reflecting on what Tonia shared about spotting red flags, rebuilding after betrayal, and the strength it takes to speak your truth publicly. We'll talk through some of the themes that hit hardest and even touch on a few things we didn't get to cover in the main episode. Whether you're here because you followed Tonia's story since Dirty John or you just discovered it last week, this recap is for you. It's about resilience, awareness, and the real conversations that need to keep happening. We want this to be an interactive experience, whether you are seeing this on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, or any other platform. We will be saving all of your questions about every guest and answering them to the best of our abilities. So grab your headphones, settle in, and let's get into it. This is the follow-up you've been waiting for, full of heart, insight, and a lot of important takeaways. Here we go.
I would like to welcome my co-host, Dave, who has helped me so much over the years, learn so much about narcissistic abuse, and who runs one of the largest narcissistic abuse Instagram handles. Hi, Dave. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So today I thought we would start by talking about that last podcast with Tonia Bales from the Dirty John show. And so she was the first wife, right? And what were your thoughts on hearing her story, learning about who she is, and then sort of connecting that to coercive control, narcissistic abuse? What were some takeaways from the show?
Biggest thing that I had noticed was just how common her story is. Whenever you speak to anybody who's dealt with any kind of narcissistic or toxic individual, when you kind of peel back the layers, you start understanding that it is such a playbook. And the fact that she went through it and came out on the other side, I think is also very inspirational. Her writing a book about it, I think it's going to be really good for people to kind of, I think more people who've been through it and the more people who they speak to or read stories about, it makes them feel not alone. So I think it's pretty powerful what she's doing. So I would say the biggest takeaway is just noticing just how common that story is and how the tactics and everything. I mean, we speak about it all the time. We talk about the narcissist playbook, right? And it's true. It's when you peel back the layers on these people, you realize that it's so pathological. It's repetitive. No matter who you go to.
Yeah, the fact that she had said that there was another woman after her,
Hmm.
and then there was Deborah Newell,
Hmm.
right? So Deborah Newell's daughter very famously killed him in self-defense, and she was pretty young. So then the trauma that came with that, but there was this sort of experience of first wife, then the second person. I don't know if they were married. I forget. The third person, second wife, I think. And to your point, this playbook of copy and paste, copy and paste. And he was very much the sociopathic, antisocial, really dangerous version of this, right? So we see narcissists that are really covert, maybe not as hazardous. He was particularly dangerous. And I think also what was really compelling about her story was that she had started this long before we had really kind of developed language to describe it. So I think I called her a pioneer during the podcast because I thought it was so interesting to think about not knowing how to describe it, which is what I remember feeling about my experience. Is I went on TikTok and I went to USC and learned and all the things. And then I found I was like, what the fuck is this? I remember looking at TikTok and it was just like, I just put in this hashtag and it was everybody, to your point, that had the same exact character that I experienced. And I was like, this is so weird. Did you ever see a school of fish and they all know to swim at the same time? Or, and you go, how do they know to do that? How it feels otherworldly.
I think that's the common theme amongst everyone who's been through a narcissistic relationship is when things blow up. It doesn't matter if it's a romantic relationship, if it's at work, or if it's with your family or somebody toxic in your family. After everything blows up, you're sitting there and you're going, "What the fuck just happened?"
Yeah.
Right? And then she kind of talks about that where she's just like she didn't understand what he was. Like there's something clearly wrong with him. And that's how I think everybody starts going down this rabbit hole of narcissistic abuse or learning about narcissistic personality disorder. Not even the disorder. Talk about just highly narcissistic traits is if you sit there and you punch into Google all the traits that these people have, and then it just pops up, and then you go down that rabbit hole, and then you're like your mind is proverbially blown because you're shocked at just how common this is and how everybody's experience kind of goes within a certain degree of accuracy, right? Not obviously not everyone is every narcissistic individual executes the playbook the exact same way. And I think she talked about that too, because she was like, yeah, he, for all intents and purposes, we had a really good relationship, but it was she noticed his behavior outside of the marriage where he was a little bit of a he was litigious when she talked about his neighbor hit their mailbox and he's like, well, we should sue them and we should say that it costs more. It was very kind of griftery kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And so that actually really I think is a really important point because when people go through this and you hear the malignant stories and you hear these crazy stories, a lot of people will sit there and go, wait, that's not my story. So maybe they're not a narcissist. Well, that's not true because they can just show up in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and I think I want this is what I know you and I both want from this podcast experience is that for me as a therapist, I have this really unique lens because people are
Mhm.
coming to me and they're telling me their stories all day, every day, and it is
Yeah.
literally the same thing. So for some people listening, they may think that A, they have a very unique story, or B, that they don't. There's so many ways that they're engaging in this kind of community. But as a clinician who literally deals with this all day, I have the benefit in some ways of having this validation because every time somebody would come into session, they're like, I had this. I'm going, holy shit, this is a wild thing. So, this podcast is going to be sort of unveiling what that playbook is over
Mhm.
time, right? So, a lot of the people that we'll be talking to in the first place will be some of the clinicians and some of the more famous versions of this. And then we're going to pivot into the regular day folk who are not my clients, but that are adjacent and have the same stories. And then you will quickly see and discover just how prevalent this is. And you're seeing it on a macro scale in our political environment. You're seeing it with a lot of CEOs. You're seeing it with P. Diddy. You're seeing it in pop culture. You're seeing it everywhere. Your neighbor is this. You might have a narcissistic father, mother, brother. Those behaviors are really sort of dangerous. You can see where it's trending now politically. There's this toxic sort of vibe just everywhere. And it's not just the United States. It really is kind of more, it seems like it's more prevalent today in the United States. But the playbook is really what I want to sort of unveil. I want people to start to talk about, all of these versions of it. I have clients that lose their children, end up in jail, lose their job, end up in an institution because their families say that they're crazy. We see this with cultic systems where if you're the black sheep, then you're outcast and then you can't find work, this kind of stuff. So we could talk a lot about the groupthink of it all and all of this, but there's so much to unpack. And I think it's going to be so important for people to understand. And I'm really, really passionate about fusing the concepts of cult abuse and narcissistic abuse because I think the word cult is something that feels strange to people, but it is very much the exact same thing. This idea of being outnumbered or having flying monkeys coming after you and stuff that is really problematic. So much to talk about, but certainly the playbook, I put that in my book and it's really important.
Yeah. I think we're fortunate because we've been in this space for a while and we've been speaking with people, speaking with one another, and then also speaking with people. You've got clients, I've got coaching clients, people who I speak to on a regular basis. And we're fortunate because we've been in it for so long that we have the pattern recognition. And for somebody new listening to the podcast who maybe they think they're dealing with a narcissist, maybe they don't, I think over time, the more you listen to the stories, the more you listen to the content about this, it becomes very validating. And I think it helps the healing process because you realize that you're not alone. I mean, this narcissistic abuse, or if you want to talk about the entire cluster B spectrum, when you peel back a lot of the layers, and I think actually Mark Vicente has a video on this where he talks about when you look at all the problems in the world, whether it be from a micro level in your relationship, in your workplace, in your families or your friends, and you scale it all the way up to the geopolitical situation that we're dealing with right now, all of that stuff comes back to pathological personalities somewhere on that cluster B spectrum. That's my opinion as well.
Agreed.
I mean, I can take a look at it, or I mean, we've looked at it for so long that we can see it, and it's so true. What they say is once you see it, you can no longer unsee it in every aspect of your life, and it also helps you realize how to deal with it, because the way that I dealt with pathological personalities in the past is completely different than the way that I deal with them today after everything that I've learned over the last 4 years dealing with this stuff. And that's what I want to get out of it. That's why I want people to be able to understand that there is hope after dealing with these people, and there's a way that you can heal from it and make sure that it doesn't cloud your or overshadow your entire life, because it happens to a lot of people. I've spoken to people where they've been in out of a romantic relationship for 10, 15, 20 years and still struggle years later. And I want people to be able to have that pattern recognition as well, to make them realize that it's not them.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a really big, heavy lift, particularly if you are trying to get out of a cultic scenario or you grew up in a religious environment where you're primed for servitude. So I always say the trifecta is the religious environment, narcissistic parents, and then a narcissistic relationship, because it's really hard for you to develop a sense of self. And I think this idea of autonomy is really the antidote. You have to really get radically involved in yourself, which sounds narcissistic. And for so many of my clients who are codependent and people pleasers and approval seekers, they are so confused by this concept. Vanessa, you want me to become a narcissist? I'm like, I'm not really worried about you becoming a narcissist, but you will, for this exercise, kind of have to think more narcissistically And they really are kind of they have an aversion to this. Oftentimes they're like, ooh, this feels weird. You want me to put up pictures of myself in my house? I'm like, yeah, bitch, you got to put up pictures of yourself in your house. Get that bikini picture out, put up your degrees, put up all of the things that make you feel good. Because if you have that trifecta, you don't have this sense of self. You're oftentimes over giving. And what happens in those environments, not that religion is the issue, but that people will exploit that, right? So they'll come for people that are willing to fall in line and be forgiving and all of this. And how I feel about forgiveness, I just think it's a hoax. I think that's,
Yeah.
I don't,
I'm with you on that one.
I think it's
Yeah.
unnecessary. I think forgive yourself. And if you feel somebody is deserving of it, if they're really apologizing in earnest, and I've needed people to forgive me many times, a zillion times, and that's fine. But I think this idea that you're just going to automatically forgive somebody who's not deserving of it is complete horseshit.
I agree. I mean, forgiveness without accountability is kind of a joke in my humble opinion. But I do believe while you don't have to forgive somebody, I think you do have to work towards kind of cutting the chains or breaking free of the emotional attachment to that person and what they did. That is the healing part of it. It's forgiveness is I do believe in forgiveness, as you said, if somebody is deserving of it and they're accountable and they regret what they did and they're apologetic and they change their behavior. But you and I both know that with pathological personalities, the chances of people changing are slim next to nil. So we need to get past that.
How do you break the chains? Let's say there's somebody around you who is not pathologically disordered, just a fight, and the person's not interested in apologizing, anything like this. How do you free yourself from that experience? So in that moment, you may have to see, that's what it gets a little weird from, like, how do you forgive them? Do you just decide maybe that they're not part of your life anymore? How do you break the chain? How do you cut that kind of emotional connection off?
That's a good question. I mean, it's happened very rarely in my life where I've had to do that, but I mean, it's definitely happened, but I think for me, it's more about wishing them well. It's just you realize that it's not you and you guys are just different. And maybe there's something that's just, you're not going to be able to get past it. And that's okay. It's okay to be different. It's okay not to see eye to eye on somebody, and it's okay to not want somebody in your life, but then wish them well and hope that they are happy in the future as well. I would probably say if you're ever going to cut somebody off, you don't want to have the negative emotions associated with it. You just want to make sure that you're not dwelling on the negative. That's where I think
I
that
think
works for me.
an old friend of mine once said, "You just wish that they get what they have the day that they deserve."
Yeah.
Whomever it is. Because a lot of the people that I'm thinking about were friends that took my abuser's side, let's say, in this experience, which is very hurtful.
Hmm.
And they'll never sort of be apologetic. And I don't know that I feel I wish them well per se. I just feel I'm not attached as much, but it does still
Yeah.
grind my gears that, people sort of Donald Trump's apologists are sort of out there, because that's really an issue, right? So P. Diddy's apologists and the people that are propping up and enabling abusers still grinds my gears. And then we can get into the whole idea of, are they being fed misinformation? Are they themselves, or are they groomed? Because there's different sort of ways that also plays out. And sometimes those intersect, which is also really, really troubling. We saw with Nancy Saltzman from
Hmm.
the Nexium cult, which always baffles me, right? Because it's like, was she a narcissist as well, or was she just so wickedly groomed? I mean, if you guys listening are not sure of the story of Nancy Saltzman, she was sort of the right-hand woman of Keith Raniere from the Nexium cult, and she went to the 11th hour, essentially going to jail, sort of backing his story. So, do the people from the Nexium cult just forgive Nancy, or do they, not want to give that energy, or is it just so hurtful that, how did they remove that emotional connection to her, undying devotion to their abuser, really? So it's hard because you don't know how to manage that cutoff. How do we, for me, I'm not connected to her emotionally. So I might could say as somebody on the periphery, oh, she was obviously groomed, and people in the cult might be, fuck you, Vanessa. She partook in this. We are really pained by her behavior. And maybe they might even say she's worse in some ways, having propped him up or stuff that. So it really is an interesting thing when you get into the enablers of it all, because then it gets really dynamic.
Well, it's like, how do you get there without repentance? I mean, I can't speak for anybody who's in the Nexium cult, but I think it would be a lot easier to potentially forgive somebody if they come back and say, "What? I made a really big mistake. I was stubborn. I was rigid, and I see it now." And if there's a genuine apology and sincerity behind it, I think it would make it a lot easier. But it's hard because a lot of apologies are empty, right? Because I mean, what they say, apologies without change behavior is just manipulation. And I think when you're in this world and you see that pattern recognition, chalk is cheap, right? We don't, I definitely look at apologies a lot different now after being in this space
Yeah.
for a few years.
I don't know that I've heard of her apologizing. Have
Mm.
you,
I don't
Nancy?
know. No, I haven't.
Yeah, I'd have to research that more. So if anybody who's listening to this knows, I would be curious about that because I'm not sure that ever came to be.
Well, it's the same
But
as the
I
Allison Mack apology tour. I haven't listened to any of them and I haven't spoken to Mark about it, but it doesn't, to me, it's when you study these pathological personalities and know them as well as what we know, you can see an apology from somebody and you can tell pretty quickly whether or not it's sincere or not, right?
I agree with that. That's a
Yeah.
good point. You have to trust your gut. If somebody comes to you and apologizes, by the way, my abuser would apologize all the time. So this is not necessarily an indicator. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. In terms of the Hollywood of it all, the highly emotive, demonstrative, expressive version of this. Oh, I'm so sorry. There are versions that will apologize um, a lot, right? So it's not, some people come to me and they'll say, um, he's a narcissist because he never apologizes. And I would say to them, and I say this to them, that is the general rule because I believe that's accurate. I do believe that my experience was an outlier. I think
Yeah.
by and large, I mean, a vast, high majority of narcissists are not even able to, almost a liar liar movie when what's his name, Jim Carrey is trying to describe the pen, and
Yeah.
I forget if
The pen is
it
blue.
was yeah, and he's like,
Yeah.
it's no, I think it was it red or blue?
No, the pen was blue, but he was trying to say that the pen was red. I think that's what it was.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. And he's
Yeah.
like, it's royal blue. Like
Yeah.
I don't think they can bring themselves to actually apologize. But I do want to just say that there are versions of this that are very Hollywood. So these are the people that are really good actors and they can just feign and cry and then sort of wipe the tears when you walk away and then just have a sandwich. So there's different versions of it. I think that might be more sociopathic, the more,
I agree. That's more kind of
right?
higher up on the cluster B spectrum because I, I
Yeah.
I have known narcissistic people to apologize, but they're empty apologies, right? They'll say, "Well, I'm sorry, but blah blah," and then they'll turn it back on you. It's like,
Yeah.
"I wouldn't have done what I did had you. I'm sorry, but I wouldn't have done what I did had you not done this." And then they start kind of executing Darvo a little bit. That's
Yeah.
now, and then when you're in the middle of it and you're not educated on it, you think, okay, well, they did apologize. But wait a second, maybe I'm the problem. Now I'm going to start apologizing because I feel bad because they did what they did because of what I did. And that mind fuckery of it all gets a lot clearer when you become educated on these pathological personalities. And
I've
you spot it.
apologized so many times. Can I give you an indicator? This is kind of, it's sort of a funny apology now upon reflection, because it wasn't that serious of a crime, right?
Mhm.
When I was doing my run across New Jersey, my best friend Natalie was Sherpaing me, right? So she's running with me the most of the 66 miles or whatever it was. And her father was actually driving the support vehicle, right? And at mile 50, I'm not even kidding, 59 or something, I just start to decompensate. And now I'm becoming a piece of shit, right? I'm just being an asshole. And I'm telling her we have to make this right turn or whatever. She's kind enough to be doing this whole thing with me as a volunteer. And we sort of butt heads. And I'm just starving. Everything hurts, whatever. And I just remember getting snippy. I don't think I even said anything bad or whatever. No, we were supposed to go, this kind of thing. And then I realized I was being such a piece of shit. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And then I just sat in it for the rest of the run next to her, just in my apology, just feeling garbage because who the hell am I to be sharp with her? What the hell am I doing? But I think what happens in that moment when you're neurotypical is you feel bad. I felt it wasn't, I'm sorry. Like I was, oh my God. Like, and I just felt very ashamed of myself. I was very embarrassed. I couldn't believe that I would even be such a piece of shit. I just remember being dark. Like I said, it's not a high crime, but that apology just sat. It was, I'm sorry. It wasn't, I'm sorry, but than anything like this. It was, I'm sorry. And I followed up with another, I'm sorry. And then I think I sent her and her father, they both pigs in blankets or something, this or whatever. But I think it's not also that we don't all make mistakes. It's if you're feeling bad about it too, you feel bad in earnest. You're just like, ooh, I shouldn't have
Well,
done that.
that's
Kind of
kind of what empathy is, right? I mean,
right.
you're putting yourself in somebody else's shoes to feel what they felt. And if you were on the receiving end of that, then fuck, you'd feel horrible about it, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Empathy has to show up.
Yeah. And that's where I find that with these pathological personalities, they don't actually have the ability to truly feel that emotional empathy of their actions against other people. That's why they say it's really difficult with narcissistic personalities, is because some of them do have the ability to display empathy, which is performative empathy or cognitive empathy. They can understand how it could make somebody feel, but they just don't care, right? And that's where it can get confusing for a lot of people who are fresh into this abuse cycle, where they think, well, wait a second, narcissists don't have empathy, well, but mine kind of displays empathy. Well, okay, you need to understand the difference between the two.
I think for me at a very young age, I grew up with nothing. So my brothers and I were these Irish Catholic ragamuffin kids, very little heat, very little food. Wake up every morning, you could see your breath. We're just really dirty, little, grimy, just nobody was around, this kind of raised by wolves kind of experience. And so I think that is what catapulted me into becoming a social worker, is that I don't consider myself overly empathetic. I don't feel that way about myself. I think I'm a little more in the middle. But I think on a macro scale, I think I understand like systemic issues. I understand the idea of having nothing. And I think that's important. That means I can put my mind around how people would be suffering without food or housing, right? So I think that is a part of me that is highly empathetic.
Mhm.
And I think that's how I operate, is with empathy around like serving the disenfranchised. And that's why I feel very called to this work, because victims and survivors are disempowered, this
Mhm.
kind of thing. So I can put myself in their shoes and others in all kinds of different realms. But I think that's what made me become a social worker, is because I have that sort of understanding of what it feels to be the underdog or something like that. And I think that lends to my empathy. It's not necessarily on a case by case, person by person, which if I'm connected to somebody, then I will feel that. And I will feel it even for strangers. But I don't, it's not like I sit there and I call myself, what do they call it, a super empath or something. I'm not crying in the corner. I think I become enraged around
No, you don't.
injustice.
No, come on.
I become enraged around injustice. I do. I become enraged. And that's,
How many times have I said to you, Vanessa, tell me how you really feel? It's a true story,
and
people.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think anger is important. I don't know how we got here, but I think anger is important for people to find, particularly if you are empathetic. If you're empathetic, you're probably angry. Or if you're not, you haven't found it yet.
Hmm. Well, especially with what's going on in the world today. Trust me.
Yeah. By the
Yeah.
way, how are you feeling about things that are going on in the world today?
It's I would say it's almost like a bittersweet feeling, because I think on one hand it's pretty horrible what's happening, especially when you understand the pattern recognition and you can see what's happening at the micro level and at the macro level. But at the same time, I'm also positive, because there is a lot of content out there and people collectively, I think, are starting to wake up. I think they're starting to see these patterns. You're starting to see fracturing within political parties. You're seeing devout religious people breaking and waking up to see what's happening within their own world. You're seeing families waking up. You're seeing people within families who have put up with pathological personalities their entire life waking up and going no contact. I mean, they talked about it on Oprah,
Yeah.
right? Oprah had that big special on it. And there's this, I would say, misinformation circulating out there that a lot of people are going no contact within families because it's a TikTok trend. And it's not. I think it's people waking up. And it's kind of what Tonia said, or what you were asking Tonia in the podcast about, when did you have the names to place to everything? And I think that's what's happening. I think with social media, with more access to content, I think the younger generations, the Gen Zs and the millennials, are more open to therapy. So they're in front of professionals who can educate, who can put names to these things. I think so. I'm hopeful at the same time. I think that you're seeing people's attitudes are changing and they're waking up to these personalities, and they're putting their foot down and they're taking control of their life back. So yeah, to answer that question, it's bittersweet. I think it's horrible what's happening from a geopolitical situation. I think it's what's happening right now is something that we haven't seen maybe ever in history.
Yeah, I think that the language is being shared everywhere. Even Darvo. I don't even know if I knew the term Darvo before 6 months ago. And now I'm seeing it everywhere. People are talking about that as it relates to Trump and as it relates to others. But the language was so important. Whenever I wrote my book and I did each of those characteristics and I went one by one through each one of them, I took the time to sort of really not just manage my own experience, but what was the data I had collected from all of my clients and followers, et cetera. But I think that language is where like the rubber really meets the road for my clients and for anyone who I've ever seen go through this. Is understanding when Trump is talking, what gaslighting looks like, what he's doing when he projects. And this is what Tonia experienced in her relationship and what we all experience. All of those characteristics are important to pay attention to. It's not that your abuser is going to have every single one of them, but, and you and I have talked about developing the quasi DSM-5 version of this, because the DSM-5, which is the criteria that clinicians use to diagnose, is basically a joke.
It is a joke, yeah.
It's a complete joke, and there's no way to sort of redo that. I've Googled it. It goes in front of a panel, and then I guess pigeons sends smoke signals to some foreign universe. I have no idea how this even works. But all of those characteristics, when my clients come to me and they, oh my God, that's what this is. When you put that recipe together, Ramani says, it's not just one thing that makes up the recipe all together. And I think we can talk about which parts of it are, let's say, the most relevant or the closest to what kind of your cookie cutter narcissist would be in terms of the overt meets the covert. What are those characteristics? I mean, certainly controlling, manipulative. I think no empathy is ground zero. I really do.
I would agree. I mean, lack of empathy or little empathy kind of it spans across the entire cluster B spectrum, right? So I would agree with you. And I would say that 100% of every single client who I've ever spoken with, the common theme amongst everyone is that lack of empathy. It's just, how could you, I think what people will end up sitting there looking at that person going, how could you do what you did? How does your brain process what you did and not feel anything? No regret, no remorse, no nothing. And I think that I agree with you. That's the foundation of that pathology for sure.
And you could see it with Tonia when there's a video of her, and maybe I'll share it with this podcast. Somehow I can input it here as we're talking. There's a video where she starts to record him. She starts to record John, and he behaves as if it's sort of, he's very flippant. He's making fun of her. This is going to happen to you. And you could see that he is getting a charge. He's feeling jazzed about harming her. And people don't do that in sort of this neurotypical relationship. They don't have this excitement to harm their partner. I think she would have had to have done something to him particularly egregious for him to have responded in a way where he was really excited to harm her. I mean, I'm not going to say that if somebody hurt my son that I wouldn't be excited to harm them. That it's not, I'm not saying that that is not some place that even a neurotypical could find themselves. But when her story, that none of that occurred, and he was extremely jazzed about harming her, and he's like passive aggressive and snarky. He's, oh, you're gonna see. It's because what she learns in these moments upon reflection is that she's sleeping with the enemy. This person is now sort of revealing themselves to have had no empathy all along. And I think that's the biggest problem for people, especially when they're dealing with a covert narcissist, is that there isn't an indicator maybe until the rearview mirror, which makes it really, really hard because you come to learn that you've shared your life with somebody who is a non-entity or
Yeah.
even has this.
It's you wake up and you realize that it was all fake. None of it was real. You were in love, or you were sleeping with, when you say sleeping with the enemy, you were sleeping with somebody who was wearing a mask, and it wasn't their true colors. And I think Tonia talks about that, right? It wasn't until after everything blew up that she looked back, and then she started, that's when the real bad abuse started happening, right? Once that break occurred. And that messes up a lot of people, because I've spoken to people who've been married for 20, 25, 30 years, and then all of a sudden woke up and realized that their partner was having an affair. They were multiple affairs throughout the relationship, and then they decided to extricate themselves from the relationship. And then that's when they become litigious, and they start the smear campaign, and they just become evil, vile human beings. And that's a mind fuck for a lot of people.
And you and I talk about this all the time, because in my case was very overt, but I have also experienced covert scenarios, and I think they're way more dangerous. And the way that I try to manage that is harder clinically. It is very difficult for me to decide. I don't know that I have some magical thing. So you and I always talk about things that they could say or express, or ways that they would behave, indicators. And one of the things that I think you and I have recently agreed upon, I've felt this way, I don't know if I brought you on board, or you can tell me I'm crazy, but I think people have this idea that if they quote unquote take it slow, that it will benefit them. And I just really push back against that. I know that that's sort of a mythical wives' tale-y kind of version of things, right? It's sort of cliche, take it slow, whatever. I just think that that's not the way to do it, because you waste time. So sort of my perspective is, in a dating scenario, if you meet somebody, that you would want to figure it out sooner versus wasting time, because that's what the covert is. The overt, not so much. We can put that in a whole other, we can talk about that one, believe me. But if you really want to peel back the layers and learn about narcissistic abuse and kind of get to the heart of why people really struggle, it's not the overt. I think I would prefer, and most of my clients would agree, somebody knocking my teeth down my throat and me knowing straight away than spending 30 years with somebody who at the end of 30 years is, you piece of shit, and is something that you can't really have a hard time climbing out of. And to your point, I see that a lot with my clients, but I think you have to push buttons. You have to say no. You have to learn sooner. So how do we learn sooner, right? How do we get that veil to fall? How do we get the mask to come off faster? Without being abusive ourselves?
I think we have to give that. So I am on board with you on that, especially with moving fast in terms of put yourself into a scenario where it can be tense, where there could be a potential conflict. When you say no, that I think is really, really important. When you say move fast, I don't mean, hey, let's jump into a full on, let's integrate our families and our friends and let's move in together. No.
Right.
We're not saying that. No,
you're right.
No, but I think From my own personal experience, I would say travel with somebody, take a flight with someone, see how they act if they're late, if the plane's delayed, or even going out to go out regularly to restaurants where they're interacting with service members. How do they treat them?
You know what I want to say?
Oh God,
Have an injury or an illness.
that's true.
They don't
That is
like
true.
that. It's like fake a seizure, have a cough randomly. Just to see how they feel.
Okay, I don't know if I'd fake a
Get one
seizure,
extra.
but okay, fake a cough, sure. I'll jump on board with that one.
Yeah, my girlfriend Yvonne and I would joke. I know I'm going to say things like, why'd you say that? I'm not saying we're going to adopt a sick dog. However, I know that if you have a creature that is not well, if you have a sick mom, or if you have a child that has an injury, and the narcissist is, that's not about me. Why are they that? They're sort of fracturing this veneer that I have up, that everything's perfect and this kind of thing. So anytime reality shows up, a cough or a sprained ankle or a family member, anytime you can or anytime that does show up, pay close attention to what's going on with your partner, because in those environments, they will generally fail. They will be confused by it. They might even disappear, or just not know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't understand this idea of being caring.
They fail the basic human decency test, and it's true, because I've seen it. And actually, an ex-girlfriend of mine, her dog was rushed to the hospital. It swallowed something and it was blocking their intestines, and it was an emergency surgery, and it was literally cut the dog from the chest bone to the belly button, open them up, fix it. And her ex had stopped by her house and stood at the door, looked at the dog and started laughing.
Could you imagine?
Right. No. And when somebody does something that, for me now, that's a huge red flag, right? And you don't expect somebody to get down on the floor and say, oh my God, what happened? There's over the top, but there's some basic level of human decency. There's a threshold that neurotypical people will demonstrate. They may not be the best at it, but they have some level of decency. And to think about somebody just taking pleasure in the fact that his ex's dog almost died, it's almost a sadist act. That's almost on the sociopathic or the antisocial behavior.
The dog is a big indicator for anybody listening. This is something that we would assess in children that have oppositional defiant disorder, which can be a prerequisite to sociopathy or antisocial personality disorder, is harming animals. So the dog can be the canary in the coal mine. If you see somebody who is unkind to animals, there isn't a bigger red flag, period. There is no bigger red flag, I don't think, on planet Earth than harming animals.
Well, yeah, I mean, you take a look at Jeffrey Dahmer, right? Domesticated animals. The guy was killing animals in the neighborhood, and he was fascinated with death. I think anybody who can physically harm and take pleasure out of physically harming a domesticated animal, to me, is just that's your biggest red flag that you can see, for sure.
Yeah, if you are listening to this right now, I would say, and we'll talk about this in other episodes, but I would say there are a few things that are the reddest of flags. And harming animals, strangulation is the biggest precursor for homicide. So those are things that feel really glaringly, run for your actual life. Never look back, because they are sociopathic. And there is a difference between the narcissist, who is going to be a sycophant and take all of your time and slowly destroy your psyche, versus somebody who could actually murder you, this kind of thing. So the sociopath is a big problem, and there are often overlaps, and some of them can do all of the above. But I think harming animals is really, really important. So if you're making excuses for the treatment of the animals in your home, your partner, you live on a farm somewhere and your partner says, oh no, the dogs need to stay out of the house, pay attention to things like that. Pay attention, because you see the dog is in the snow and is lifting the one leg and can't put its foot down, because these things, don't ignore that. I mean, that's not just kind of the way that this person was brought up. They are disconnected from that creatures experience. And that is a huge, I just got these bird feeders in front of my house. I don't know if I showed you these, Dave. They're the cutest things. They're the ones that you put on the window with the
Yeah, you
little
showed me. Yeah,
cups.
yeah.
Obsessed. And I feel I'm feeding the world's birds, and I'm obsessed. I think it's the
Are you the
cutest
bird?
thing.
Are you the bird whisperer?
I just, first of all, I didn't even know that I loved birds, and now I'm having so much fun, but I care about creatures, like I just care. I didn't even know that I cared about birds this much. But the other thing I just want to say too is that Donald Trump has no dog. Okay, so when people say he's a narcissist, I'm saying it's worse than that, because he doesn't have to have handlers for that dog. He can just, I'm sorry, he doesn't have to handle the dog. He can just have handlers for the dog. So the dogs can just be there. But I think it's the way he thinks about dogs. And he'll say things, oh, you like a dog, or you act like a dog, or you're a loser, a dog. And so I think the way that he frames those creatures are less than, dirty. So he doesn't have empathy, but really sort of to the highest degree. And that makes him extremely dangerous, as I mentioned earlier, red flags. It's not just that he's a narcissist and he's concerned about optics. I'm actually I'm not even convinced he's as concerned about optics, because he wouldn't be fat anymore. He would just take Ozempic. But he is not the sexy Trump at all. He just is disconnected from feeling about anyone. I think he only cares about himself. I don't even think he cares about his rich friends.
I would agree. I think it's self-serving, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to ask you a question about Tanya's thing that it kind of piqued my curiosity when she talked when you asked her the question about his childhood, Dirty John's childhood, and she had talked to his family, and from what I remember, she said that he grew up, he was kind of a good kid. His family described him as a good kid, and then there seemed to be some kind of fracture that happened when his parents got divorced around the age of 14. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know that there's this hot topic debate within this community on the nature and nurture of narcissism.
Yes.
That discussion to me kind of led, and I'm not saying that this is what it was intended, but it felt it was kind of, there was a big trauma that happened in his childhood, which led him to be the way he is. And obviously you and I have spoken at length about the nature and nurture of narcissism, but what are your thoughts on that in terms of his level of malignancy? You know what I'm saying? That's the thing that kind of really threw me for a loop. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think she went on to say that the divorce that was he aligned with the father? Because that's what I remember her saying, was kind of, he was angry maybe at mom.
So she said that he was abusive. His father was abusive, and his mother finally got to the point where she was enough is enough.
Right.
And then the father blame shifted and basically sat the kids down and said, your mother left because of you. So he then became aligned, I guess, with his father, with his abuser.
Right.
But to me, it's almost, was it the trauma of that? Or was it just birds of a feather flock together? You know what I'm saying? I'm really torn on that, because a lot of people who I speak to want to blame or maybe not so, or maybe explain away their bad behavior because of childhood trauma, because of stuff that they went through. And I find that a lot of people hold on to hope. They're okay, if I can only get them into therapy, or if I can only get them to see how they're acting, how horrible it is that they're acting, they can change. You and I both know that these pathological personalities don't change. The chances of them changing are pretty slim, next to nil, right? So I don't know. I wanted to talk about that with you, because I wanted to get your opinion on it.
Very interesting. And I think a lot of people talk about nature and nurture, and certainly Psych 101, everybody talks about this. But what I notice with my clients is, by and large, and it's not every single one, there is a lineage. The same-sex parent behaves in the same way and is abusive. And so it feels there's some kind of a biological piece. And so in the case of Dirty John Meehan, when his mother was blamed, or when they were blamed and the mother was blamed for father's departure, yes, it would be an injury for sure, trauma all around. But whenever he meets, let's say, Tonia, and she doesn't sort of behave that way, and she doesn't harm him any further, there should have been healing. In a neurotypical scenario, this person would have been, okay, I feel this wife of mine or this husband of mine is not duplicating that sort of narrative. And so there should have been healing the same way when you have, let's say, attachment styles. If you hang out with secure people and you have all the most fucked up attachment styles, you become more secure. So if you're with somebody who is neurotypical and healthy, in theory, you should become healthier. But I don't think that he's neurotypical. I just think that he's biologically fucked. I do. And I think that that's what we used to think about schizophrenics, that it was this nurture experience. And then we subsequently learned that it wasn't. And Dr. Peter Salerno talks about that in his book, which I love the idea of it, because I see so much of this. I see this lineage. I see the toxic parent and then the toxic child. But to your point, there are oftentimes scenarios with grooming, and that's where it gets muddy for me. And that's why it's a great debate, because it's the person being fed a narrative, or they being groomed into being abusive. But I don't know, because why would he then not want to be connected to Tonia or Debbie if they're being decent partners, which it seems they were, and everyone around him, actually, including, I think, ultimately his own parents were. I don't know what happened to him, or his own mother did. I don't know what happened to him, right? Even in what you're describing. So it's possible that he was able to hide it because he has peers that he wants to impress. He knows he'll get in trouble. I've seen, there was this one sociopathic woman. She did some big series on YouTube where she was talking about how she would really want to hide it. She didn't want anybody to know that she was robbing houses. Do you remember I sent that to you a long time ago? She's really, really dangerous. And she figured out a way to hide it. So I think they figure out that societally, they're not going to succeed if they are their authentic selves, so I think they learn how to be manipulative very young, and they know how to hide it. And they know, they're looking around saying, I can't act this way, or I'm going to find myself in a juvenile detention center, or I'm going to find myself here, there, and everywhere. But I tend to be in the all of this to say, I tend to be in the more biological camp.
Yeah, it's a lot across that entire cluster B spectrum. There is an underlying need to wear a mask to kind of protect their true authentic self. I don't think anybody would ever describe most narcissists as being true authentic people, right? And I think that is learned. And so maybe that with John, it was when he went through that traumatic divorce, it just accelerated and he was kind of set up with the biology, and then the trauma just took it to the next level or made it even worse.
Yeah, because he did manage to wear a mask anyway after that, to some extent, right? It's like he just. And even Jeffrey Dahmer knew how to parade around the cops when the bodies were in the fridge, or let me just act this way. They have a level of, okay, let me be performative. I mean, if they didn't, what might they look like? I guess. I mean, I don't even know a version. What's the worst?
Well, it's Bundy was the same way, right? Charming, convincing, even up until the point when it was even in the middle of his trial, he still had his supporters. And it wasn't until the bite mark on one of his victims that linked his teeth where people were, holy shit, this guy's for real. I don't know, maybe it's a Hannibal Lecter. Maybe if there was unfiltered, it would be somebody like a Hannibal Lecter. I don't know.
Right. No, but you make a good point, because what might it even look? We think that monsters are going to look monsters, and they don't. Mm-hmm. They don't look that. These are your neighbors. These are people who are in your community that have either cultic family systems.
Well, they're in the corporate space too. They're bosses, they're coworkers, they're CEOs, executives. I mean, I had a friend of mine from Montreal who was a therapist, and some of her clients were some pretty high-powered CEOs. And I can remember this, and this is going back 20 years. She was telling me that if people knew the number of psychopaths that were running Fortune 500 companies, people would be blown away. So it's everywhere. It is. It's so prevalent.
You know what freaked me out? I think the scariest thing I ever heard was, because there are obviously psychopathic and sociopathic and narcissistic therapists for sure. Mm-hmm. But I think the scariest thing probably was teachers. That one freaked me out. That's freaky. I have a client, and her abuser drives a school bus
Oh,
and has a very long history of abuse, but got it expunged. And he drives a school bus, so you're just out in society, and you put your kids on the school bus, and your psychopath just drives away. It's wild how they're everywhere. And I
yeah.
think people say, "Oh, this is an overused term." Listen, it's not. And you're starting to see that in this political climate. You're starting to see what it looks like in different shapes and forms.
Yeah.
So get out of here with this idea that it's everywhere. And that's why I don't leave my house, Dave. And that's basically how I want to just end today's session. Dave, why do I leave my house, honestly?
Probably to shovel the 25 inches that you guys just got the other day and to walk your dog.
Yeah. I mean, I just, on occasion I'll go out, but I mean, for the most part, I'm just not going out. It's gotten really weird. It's gotten a little weird.
Well, and I think the more educated you become on this pathology, the smaller your world will become naturally. And that's just, unfortunately, that's the product of all of your education and learning on this subject. You start seeing it everywhere, and you slowly distance or you put space between you and people with these types of pathological personalities, and then you learn how to deal with them, and so that they don't affect your life anymore. And
Yeah.
when you do that, when you start recognizing the patterns, you realize just how prevalent it is. And that's the thing. You and I have spoken about this. Just because somebody may not meet the DSM criteria for having narcissistic personality disorder doesn't mean that there aren't narcissists out there. If somebody has 4 out of the 9, they're not a narcissist, but they have 5 out of the 9, they're okay, fine. From a clinical diagnosable perspective, absolutely. But there are a lot of people that are in that mid-range that demonstrate a rigid pattern of pathological behavior. Those people are the ones who cause the most damage in society because they blend into society so well, and they just wreak havoc everywhere they go. And it's, as I said, it's people you work with, your bosses, your friends, your people who you meet in the dating world. It's family members. There's so many toxic family members, and the stories that I hear are just, they're heartbreaking. But people are waking up to it. So stay inside
Yeah.
your house. You can avoid them.
I think it is about power, and it's about insecurity. And so if you stay connected to your own autonomy, people call this boundaries, right? So therapists will often throw around boundaries, but really what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to do this hobby, I'm going to have these friends, I'm going to have this career, I'm going to have these finances, in spite of what you're going to do. I'm going to stay connected to my own autonomy and be boundaried in that. I think that is a good insulator. It's not to say it's going to keep them away because they're everywhere, but stay connected to those things: finances, friends, hobbies, job, home. I think that they tend to move on because they can't control you. And that's really important. In terms of the more covert, I think you have to be a little more on the offense. I think you have to be inquisitive. I think you have to ask them questions directly around their ability to emotionally connect. I think you have to see how they will deal with, as we mentioned, illness. You have to kind of press them a little more. The overt is easier to find. The covert, and we can unpack this one for the rest of our lives, which I'm willing to do because I think it's so compelling. I think that one is tricky. I think there's a quasi entitlement, but it's so nuanced. It's really, really tricky. It's not as obvious. That
I
one.
agree. I think the covert is the one who provides the biggest mind fuck, because I hear the stories on a daily basis where they will say, everybody loves my abuser. Everybody thinks my abuser is amazing. Everyone thinks that they're so kind and thoughtful and considerate. And then as soon as the door closes at home, when things get stressful, when buttons get pushed, that's when you see their mask slip. And it's such a mind fuck for people because it's you want to scream from the rooftops, this is what they're doing, but you can't because they're so beloved. And well, not all of them, but a lot of the coverts are obviously very charming. They have a very superficial charm and likability about them, and that's the difficult part. And it's hard for people to wrap their head around how people that can exist, because that it's almost like you start gaslighting yourself. You start thinking you are the crazy one, and you think, am I seeing things? Am I the problem? And it's not until you get out of that dark cloud that you can kind of see the patterns and recognize that it's not you.
Yeah. And I think the question really becomes, you have to see if they are able to emotionally connect. And whatever that means for you, because you know your partner better than anyone, is how do you develop queries that will provide you with answers around their ability to do that? So
Right.
thinking about what you might ask somebody to see if they have an ability to connect emotionally. That might look if they've ever been in love before. That one feels really relevant because I remember asking a few people in my past that I believe were narcissistic, and they seemed to be confused by the concept. I don't know.
Mm.
So I think if you ask them questions and they don't know, right? If you feel something they should know and trust yourself, why don't you? The answer
Right.
would be no
And,
or yes.
and asking that question at 23 versus
Right.
53, I think are two very different.
Fair
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. And
Totally.
a 23-year-old may not even know what love is, but at 53, maybe you've never been in love, but you've never stopped to ask yourself the question, what is love? What does love mean to me? If you haven't had that self-reflection at that point, I think it's would I call it a red flag? Or maybe a yellow flag, or I think a pink flag is what you and Tonia said on the
Yeah.
podcast. It's definitely
Yeah.
something, and this is what I tell a lot of people: journal, write down stuff, document it. Not because you're trying to catch the person, but I think what we all need to do is document all the stuff that comes up, but also document the good stuff so that you can kind of see, even with the good stuff, a lot of time people will look back and go, oh man, that was all performative. It was good, but it was all performative. It wasn't real. And then I think when you start documenting the bad stuff as well, that's when you really start recognizing the pattern recognition, and you can discern, is this just a character flaw, or is this an actual pathological trait that is rigid and doesn't change? That's where I think people, when you don't journal, I know myself, it's happened in my past where I've completely forgot arguments or conflicts that I got into because my brain literally erased it. That was really scary for me. So
Yeah.
journaling, I think, really helps that. I think for sure.
Agreed. You have to
Yeah.
take notes, especially for dating. I tell all my clients is take notes.
Yeah.
So just as we wrap up today, what are some takeaways from, I think for me, from Tonia's experience? I think that it was really amazing to watch the full circle of it, meaning she had started this journey before I think the language was really developed. And then for her to see it come to full on fruition in terms of him expiring and being unalived
Mhm.
and managing to tell her story, and come out on the other side of that with a ton of healing, remarried, happy grandbabies,
Yeah.
that kind of ghost of Christmas future, and how she was able to help so many people also through her story, writing a book. But I think it's just it sort of runs the gamut. It's literally from A to Z. Her experience is it's a tie a ribbon on it. The whole story
Yeah.
is encapsulated in her journey. You know what I mean? And even just the Netflix story about her, it's this the entire story. So if you guys want to learn about, a sociopath and you haven't seen any of the Dirty John series, check out the Dirty John stories. And Debbie Newell is going to be on the podcast as well. And we're going to talk about her experience with John, which is also really, really wild, actually. So, but I think that's the takeaway. For me, was this whole, from A to Z, the whole thing occurred, and then how she comes out on the other side.
Yeah. She went through the entire life cycle from start to finish. And I think what's inspirational about her story is that she has the ability now to help so many people who have also gone through that. And I really liked how you guys talked about what was I can't remember how you worded it. What was the bright side, or was it, I can't
Silver
remember.
lining.
The silver lining, right? And I've found in this space, once people have come out on the other side, I have personally found a lot of people experience a lot of gratitude. It's a horrible experience that they go through, but what they've learned, how they've grown themselves, a lot of these relationships kind of force people to start looking at themselves, looking inward, and kind of look at their own codependency or look at their own childhoods and understand kind of how these patterns have played a role in their life. And at the end of the day, when you come out on the other side, you can only be better for it because of the fact that going forward in the rest of your life, you can recognize these patterns. You can see these in other people, and you can create the buffer or create the distance so you don't repeat those same mistakes.
And then we can also teach our children how to protect themselves too, which is really sort of the next level,
That's
spreading awareness for sure.
Yeah, the next generation coming up, I'm actually very hopeful that they're going to have the words, they're going to have the stories. And I would love to see pathological personalities taught in high school when kids start dating and start getting into romantic relationships, because I can look back into my own high school. I can think of a couple of relationships of friends that were 100% pathological, right? And if these people have the words back then, you can really insulate yourself from those types of abusive behaviors.
Yeah, for sure. And even the group think of it all. So even if it's not just that there's somebody who you should stay away from, also just staying away from environments where there's just a group of people and you just fall in line with them, right? And we can talk about that more in terms of there's usually a hierarchy there, somebody who's like the hell of this, but anytime we can keep our kids from falling into this, I'm going to follow, this kind of stuff is really important, really important.
We can save this for another podcast episode, but I can tell you from my own personal experience and with a very close friend of mine, that starts in the sporting world. The sporting world, the youth sports world is a breeding ground for toxic behavior.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. And you think of the Larry Nassers of the world, right? There are people in those communities that are pathological as well. And they're looking at a bunch of younger children who can be groomed.
Yep.
Right. And so,
that's a great
we can talk about that. Yeah.
We'll have to find somebody to come on the podcast from that realm, and then we'll have
I know someone. I have someone.
All right, Dave. So we'll just pivot away for now. I had a great chat with you today. Thank you for coming on. And we're going to do this more and more. I love chatting with you. It's my favorite conversation, next to Yvonne, of course. Hi, Yvonne. But yeah, so we'll pick up next time. Next time we're going to be talking about Gretchen Carlson, who I did film with today, and that was phenomenal. She's doing such important work with NDAs, and so stay tuned for that.
Can't wait.
Okay, I'll talk to you, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on Narcissistic Abuse with Vanessa Reiser. If this episode resonated with you, or if you recognize any of these patterns in your own life or someone you care about, know that you are not alone and healing is possible. If you found value in this conversation, please take a moment to like, subscribe, share, and leave a review. It helps us reach more survivors who need to hear these messages. For exclusive bonus content, deeper discussions with Dave and me, and ways to support the show, join us on Patreon or follow along on Instagram or YouTube at Vanessa Reiser LCSW. Until next time, keep choosing yourself, setting boundaries, and walking toward the light. And remember, healing is a radical rebellion, and your peace is the revolution. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.